Mic's on, everyone. Call the meeting to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes from October 5th. Any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 5th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Communications, possible action, none? Still true, too?
Yep.
Okay. Unfinished business, none. 5A, new business, Kevin and Tracy Sharnick, owner by Carl Tomich, Westbridge Builders, agent rate, consideration and possible action on the approval of a certified survey map to combine two parcels created by deed that make up the subject parcel into one parcel located N27W30037 Maple Avenue.
All right, up on the screen I have a notation in the blue, way on the bottom. That's the location of the property there. This is the first page of the certified survey map. So the property is made up of Lot 1 of the subdivision as well as a fifth of Lot 2. That fifth is on the, when you're looking at this sheet, it's on the lower part of it. It actually goes through the garage a little bit. And so I think they're gonna do some improvements on the site of some sort, and the county requires them to, and the town, we'd like them to combine the lots so that they can meet the offset requirements. And so a CSM is required to eliminate that line. As part of that CSM, they're gonna dedicate some roads, so we end up with a full 33 feet of right-of-way along Maple Avenue. I have not received any comments from the county, so if any recommendation is made, it would be subject to county comments. My comments have been incorporated into this document that's dated October 12th from a technical standpoint. And all it really does is it eliminates that line in between, and the parcel remains basically what it is used as today. So I recommend approval of the CSM dated October 12th, subject to resolution of any Waukesha County review comments.
Any discussion?
Motion to approve the CSM dated October 12th, 2021, subject to the incorporation of any comments from Waukesha County Parks and Land Use Department.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5E, Wisconsin Hero Outdoors, W329S690, County Highway C by Tammy Sawyer, reconsideration and possible action on the approval of a wall sign at their facility located at W329S690, County Highway C.
All right, the property is located, as we stated, off Highway C. It's the lower portion, lower property on the plan that I've got on the screen here. It's the old fire station number 2. The proposal is to put in a 47-inch round sign. I know it's difficult to see on this, but it's a round sign, green background with some white logo and some white lettering that says Wisconsin Hero Outdoors. I always want to say it the other way around. On that, the property is zoned A2. It's got 320 feet of frontage. We have a limitation by zoning district that states that you can only have 11 square feet of signage for every 200 feet of frontage, and you can't round up. The sign size is actually 12 square feet, and that doesn't include the words Town of Delafield on it. And our code requires that be added unless the Plan Commission wants to waive that requirement. However, 1706 or 086F states that in a different section of the code states that the total area for wall signs can be determined by Plan Commission. So there's a little bit of a conflict in the code. You know, I usually take it as being you got to follow the most restrictive, which would be 11 square feet. We do have an option for a variance that the Plan Commission can grant if there's if there's area enhancements or a site difficulty. I think that that sign, as it's proposed, if it had to be reduced, even reduced further to get Town of Delafield on, it gets smaller and smaller, obviously a little harder to see, which could cause issues if you're zipping down Highway C like they do. If you live down there, you know that they drive pretty fast on Highway C, and may cause, could cause an accident, could cause some slowdown to see what's there. So I have really no issues to have the sign be 12 square feet, but also allow the Plan Commission to add some area if we want the addition of Town of Delafield on the sign there, because it would go over 12 square feet. I don't know how much it would go over, but that would increase it beyond the 12 square feet. Obviously, maybe another square foot or something like that. So it'd be more, looking at it more as a variance. Or you can interpret the code that says that the wall sign can be determined by the Plan Commission to say we could raise it up using that code as well. That's all I have. Any questions?
The 200, the 11 feet per 200 feet of frontage, I understand you don't round up, but we don't prorate either? Is that 320 feet to get like
It's the way it's
17?
written, yeah. You have to have the full
Full
200
200
feet to get bump it up to 22.
Okay. Just for the math.
Yeah, it's a
Wizards, it's
60%
17.6 feet if we prorated it.
Yeah, it would. So 12 is very reasonable. But how much do we add for the Town of Delafield?
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that the sign's kind of small. I mean, it doesn't like do it justice, and then,
No,
and then if, we require the Town of Delafield, we don't want that to be, I mean, we've
4-inch.
seen, we've seen that in the past. I mean, I would question, what would be a reasonable amount, but I mean, I don't think,
We're ratioing it up to 17 feet,
yeah.
because it's a 60% increase. From 200 feet to 320 is a 60% increase. If you increase it 11, 60%, you're at 17.6. And if we made it 17, the sign would be larger, be more visible, and we could have a decent size that said Town of Delafield, which
So we allow them to go up to 17, we wouldn't mandate it, but we
We
would
allow
mandate
them
them
to
to
use
include the
their
town
judgment.
of
Yeah.
Delafield.
Yeah, I think that's my thinking is, we'd allow up to 17 feet, 17 square feet, but we would want the Town of Delafield to prominently be there.
Got it. Who's here for the,
Is Ms. Sawyer?
it's
Oh.
Stevie Sawyer.
you good with that?
Absolutely.
All right, well, we should do a motion then.
Well, so where would be, I guess if you included the town of Delafield on here,
It's on the bottom.
It's usually on the bottom, underneath. Other
Okay.
words.
is there a
Underneath
font
outdoor.
requirement?
So what?
There's not a font or a size requirement, we would just say prominent.
Just so it's readable from the road.
Yeah, there's no lighting, there's no electrical or anything up
Correct.
there, so a larger sign would be more beneficial. I mean, we have the, what do I call it, the street sign, but, that does at least reflect onto the building, so I think a larger sign would probably help.
I'm just trying to think about where she would put town of Delafield on it with a round.
On the bottom, underneath outdoors.
Yeah,
Okay.
town of, and then
Okay,
underneath
got
that Delafield or something.
Okay.
We kind of leave it up to the designer to come up with something. It can come back to staff for final review before they give a permit. I mean, they need a sign permit, which they've applied for, so it has to come back to staff. I think they were trying to make their effort to meet the code at 11 square feet, which is what we've been discussing over time here.
You want to make them?
Motion to approve the sign variance for Wisconsin Hero Outdoors, maximum of 17 square feet, with the requirement that Town of Delafield be prominently displayed on the sign, with staff giving final approval before issuing the permit.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 5C, Town of Delafield Plan Commission reconsideration, discussion, and possible action on a proposed outdoor light ordinance for the town of Delafield.
All right, all I've got for a slide for this is just the table of contents for this. The intent here is to give you kind of a first cut of a potential lighting ordinance. I looked at a number of different lighting ordinances. Heartland, City of Delafield, Village of Pewaukee, New Berlin, Shaniqua, Waukesha, Muskego, and Mequon. Just trying to find some compatible communities in it. The interesting thing that I found out is that a lot of communities have 1 page or less for their lighting, and very few standards, very few ways to measure the total light output on the site. A lot of communities ask for the same things that I do, which is a plan that shows where the light poles are going to be, the light poles, the height, the fixtures. They all have to be cut-off type fixtures, especially in the parking lot and on the building, which means, you know, you don't see, it's not like the flood lights that we see in some of the ag lands and some of the past commercial sites where you just have a lot of light coming out. You're not supposed to see the light. We asked for a ISO diagram that shows, you know, the contours of the light around. And then at property lines, I've been pushing for basically 0 foot candles at the lot line. That's what I've been doing throughout. I see a lot of codes that I've gone through that they would allow up to 0.5 foot candles at the property line, and then 0.1 at 10 feet off the property line there. So the intent tonight is basically just to walk through it, see if you like the format. It's a little bit different in the sense that we have all those requirements for the plans that we still have to come in, so we can evaluate those. There is a, Section 6 talks about the total outdoor light output. So you take everything, all the lights that are exterior, and then any interior lights that would reflect out, and then you determine a total output. This particular ordinance kind of follows Mequon, and I spoke to them about how it's going and how did they come up with the number. And basically they said that they took past projects, kind of calculated what they like, and then created these numbers for those. They have some rural areas, they have some more urban areas, town center type areas if you've been in Mequon. And so far they've been satisfied with the numbers that they have, but he said that it's likely that those numbers would change depending on what they think. You know, if things are getting too much light, then they'll probably tone those down. As far as, you know, they changed the code. The other thing to mention is I did look at dark sky information, if you're familiar with that. They've got model ordinances. The model ordinance is like 44 pages. So it's a little bit more in detail. It's got a lot of very, very detailed ways to measure different things and ways or standards that you have to follow.
Take a big step back, Tim. I was looking at the map earlier tonight. I don't think we have any commercial land left that could be developed. Now with the car dealership redone up on 16, the commercial building and the storage facilities down on Highway 18, is this going to be solely a residential lighting?
There's some
and how do we
residential
apply
issues.
it,
There could be residential associated with it. There's a section on shoreland, which I took from Shaniqua, because they had a good one for that. At least they had no other one had a shoreland one, but Shaniqua did, and so I used that and tweaked it a little bit. There may be other commercial around. There's going to be commercial next to OAW.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know where else there's going to be commercial if land use plan changes take place. This can be used for basically multifamily, if that was to come in. Not saying that it will come in, but I mean, anything, at least we have some standards in place. So what happens now is if a development comes in, and whether it's a development, a church, we've got the church down the road that we've heard some concerns about, that we can say, here's our lighting standards, but right now, we don't have any standards.
Right.
So it's a little bit whatever I go with, which is like zero foot candles at the lot line, which the church meets. But we didn't really look at total light on the site. Not only did does the church have lights on for the parking lot, but both they and OAW have lights on the building. Now, based on what I looked at for the church and OAW, they'd meet the standards that are in this by a long shot. Okay, because these are like, it's like 100,000 lumens per acre. And then I talked to Macwan about that, and they said they don't look at like the whole site. So you wouldn't look at the OAW 7 acres, you would look at OAW, just the site where the building and parking lot is. And so that reduces it down. Where you get in trouble with that 1,000 lumens per acre is when you have small sites and you have a parking lot and you have to have 3 or 4 lights in that parking lot. It's only on a half acre or less lot. Then that's where they say that's when that gets difficult. And then there's a catch-all at the very end of the code that basically says that the Plan Commission can make changes or waive the requirements in special circumstances, things like that, which is kind of the catch-all.
Currently, do we, or historically, have we ever regulated lighting in residential? Do we require a subdivision developer to bring in a lighting plan?
No, we don't have street lights, other than what we'll say is, we look at if there's
Post
I won't
lights.
say a major intersection, but if there's an intersection with either like, so at Woodridge, there's an intersection with KE. At White Oak, there's intersection with Cushing Park Road. At Retreat, we have no lights. So they're gonna have some lights at their entrance, on their entrance sign, but other than that, there will be no lights. It will be dark there, other than what's on the homes, Now, for the homes, what we're trying to do is make sure that they, and this is where they try to get residential, is with the glare. And that's the same with the shoreline areas. Get rid of the glare, get rid of the light trespass. There are people that put up lights, spotlights on different things that shine into people's windows. That's the complaint I've gotten in the past on that. Not a lot of complaints, but some, and we have no way to tell them you can't do that. It becomes a nuisance, which is very hard to regulate.
And this would apply retroactively then? So if somebody was complaining about their neighbor?
It does not, unfortunately.
We could do that if they, I think it states it in here, if they do, I don't know if it's like, if they change, if they
do a big addition or
something with
something.
their land, a certain amount of addition, then we can have them do that, look at the whole property. If they do, I think it's 25% or more of an addition or a development, then we can have them look at all the lighting for the land. But if they do some small little addition, no.
Well, or if I have a neighbor that currently is lit up like a prison, I can't use this sign ordinance to go after them and say, hey, knock it off.
Not right now, until they do something that they have to come back and,
Well,
They
couldn't we
change.
do it under section 10 of hours of operation? All outdoor
Well,
illumination should be
and we
turned
can-
off?
we can talk
Close
about
the
that and try to
business
enforce
hours?
that, yeah. I think we can enforce that part of it. I think there's sections that we could enforce, but I don't think we can say, you gotta take down all your lights and change all your lights out.
Well, I guess from a philosophical standpoint, do we want to be the light police in residential? I mean, maybe we do.
We want to have the power to do it because we have received numerous complaints And that's, I have along the lake where people have lights red and green lights that shine into people's homes. People have lighting issues with their neighbors, and their neighbors don't take down the lights, and we have no mechanism in our code now to do anything at all.
Well, I think it's a philosophical issue, though. I think it's a philosophical issue between, maintaining the rural characteristic of the town of Delafield and public safety, but then also kind of the philosophical issue of the town board and the plan commission over the years where they really haven't gotten involved in neighbor disputes. I mean, they've just been like neighbor disputes. And, in my mind, I'd like to understand what the enforcement mechanism is on something like this. And then also just, as just a point of reference, are there properties in the town currently that are not in compliance of this code as written? You said OAW and the church would pass this code with no problem. And I think just to have that point of reference as like a real world example to look at.
The only thing I would say is I could only look at the lights that were on the lighting plan. I don't, like for OAW and the church, I don't have any other lighting. I looked at the construction plans, architectural plans, and there's no, like the lighting that's on the building and the lighting that's under the eaves, I have no information on. Nothing, no plans to say what were those lights, what were the lumens on those lights. And so I can't calculate the total, but it sure seemed to be like it's not gonna get that close to what's in here. But that number, once again, it's basically taken from Mequon. They have a standard that they want. We can put in a standard and lower that standard as well. So, if this was to go forward, I'd probably want to look at some other examples somehow and get an idea of what that number really is,
Well, and I think that's a good idea, because I think with Ted's point, I think it's good to have real-world examples. And maybe you could even ask OAW or the church, because the church is newer, do they have a sense for what the total lumens
Yeah.
are on their buildings? So that we get a sense for, this one is at 900 and we're saying it's 1,000, so we know, kind of what 900 looks like. But I also think we have an issue on the residential versus commercial. I think from a commercial standpoint, this makes a lot of sense, and I think we need to go through it and make a lot of, fine-tuned decisions and then go to public hearing and all that stuff. On a residential side, I think it's more of a philosophical debate at this point, unless we're all saying we should regulate our neighbors' lights, which.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, if you want to back off on the residential, to have standards, high standards where you have to go and measure the light at the lot line and things like that, it maybe just be an issue of glare, That's where I think the people are concerned about. If someone's shining their light directly at someone else's house, be it as a landscaping element or some kind of other functional lighting, a floodlight on a accessory building. I don't know if you have one, but
No.
no, you don't. It's not your house.
Yeah, I was-
You just put up an accessory building, and I thought, or an
Like,
addition
like
or
a
whatever.
maker angry. No.
But if you had a floodlight on an accessory building that shines right into someone's window, that's maybe more what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, and I'm totally sympathetic for that, because I can think of several real-world examples along the lake, as, Mr. Troy has, expounded to, where that light pollution and that light creep definitely doesn't stop at the property line. It lights up, 2 or 3 different properties, and, it's that, it's there for safety, but it's also obnoxious, so it's, I can understand why this is in front of us this evening, but I think, we have to kind of all think, philosophically, if we want to become and get into the light police business. And then the fact that this isn't like retroactive, we can only get them on that if they do improvements to their property. And it doesn't sound like there's really a way to stop that light pollution currently under the way that this is written today.
Well, we could ask the legal counsel if we can retroactively regulate some of these or all of these regulations. I think we'd have trouble making people replace lighting, but
I think 10, again, is a catch-all that says we're gonna make them turn everything off at 11 o'clock.
We
Hours
could,
of
yeah.
operation for residents? I'm pretty sure it's 24/7.
Hours of operation for, I thought it was for lights.
Well, it's basically say you gotta turn your lights off when you're closed.
Well, and I think the issue is there are people who leave on their lights all night. I mean, I've seen people who I drive by and they leave them on all night. I mean, and it's not, they're not obnoxious, it's just like their front, their front door light.
Yep.
Yeah, but taking into consideration the recent discussions and public hearings and comments from citizens regarding the Thomas family farm and development, lighting was a critical issue for everybody on that development. And it wasn't just, a lot of it was the commercial, but it was also residential lighting. So, I mean,
And I can tell you from personal experience that when you take a farm field and you put a bunch of houses on it, you're gonna get light pollution.
Yeah.
And, it's just how much can you live with and how much, you're gonna get light pollution. People have their post lights, people have their houses lit up for, safety and security, which our sheriff encourages. So it's trying to weigh that fine line and that fine balance. So, I'd just be curious to understand, based on what's written here, how much of the town is potentially out of compliance to the way that this is written, and then, is this just gonna be, neighbor complaints, and like how's the enforcement mechanism gonna work to make sure that it has teeth that we can, actually enforce some of these things, and they're not gonna get, drug out, and we're not just gonna call them here in front of the board and, slap them on the wrist if there's some real, and figure out what the penalties are gonna be.
enforcement action.
Well, and Tim, what do you mean by glare? Is that the opposite of cutoff lighting? So,
Glare is basically, it's more or less defined as if you have a light, cutoff is just where the light, you're cutting off the light to see,
Can't
what
see
you
the
see
light
the light.
fixture.
Glare is more of a, where it's pointed at something. There's actual, a directional to glare to, if a light is going right into someone's window, that would be glare, if it's affecting their eyesight.
Is there like, that was actually one question I had, is there a definition? Because I'm trying to figure out the difference between a light in someone's window versus glare on someone's window.
Yeah, here it's defined as intense light from an illumination source which may result in visual impairment or discomfort. Also, a light ray emanating directly from a source such that it falls directly upon the eye of the observer.
I guess like discomfort is,
yeah, I get,
like my
I-
husband flips on the light because I'm asleep and it hurts. I mean, it's like, it's one of those things that no one really likes, like lights in their eyes, period.
Yeah.
Ugh.
yeah, and I could see where, spotlights or, something where it's, shining on a tree, but it's really shining on their bedroom window, and all you see is the spotlight
Right.
in the bed of the property next door. That I could see objectionable. But someone's got a lamppost in their front yard, which has a light fixture in it, but it's there next to their driveway like it is for every driveway in the subdivision. That doesn't seem like something we would want to regulate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And we could require that those types of lights, or, you've got, I know some subdivisions, I think Dover Bay has lights in front of each house, they have lights.
Almost every subdivision requires it.
And so,
I
but
had to
if
buy a
we,
light
if we
post.
can keep those lumens low, like
we should still
maximum
keep them
40
low.
watts or something like that, 40-watt light bulb, that would reduce the potential for that being glare. But if you can put in a 250-watt or 300-watt spotlight, that's different.
Well, these
So-
LED lights are so much brighter too now, so.
What's that?
Say,
Oh,
The-
LED,
the-
yeah.
The LED
we
light.
require yellow light, not white light?
So
So-
what's the genesis of this ordinance? Like where's, why is it coming up?
We have no
Well, because I
regulations.
insisted on it from
Okay.
Tom's farm. And
Okay.
we're going through all of our we need a lighting ordinance. We need some control over the lighting, both commercial and residential, in the town as we continue to develop.
No, and I understand with things going forward that are either, see, what my concern, I guess, when I was reading this is, it's, and the 2A, B, and C don't really explain if it's, all three have to, but it says the following regulations shall apply to all luminaries installed, erected, or maintained in all districts. So that basically installed, erected, or maintained. I mean, maintaining, I suppose.
If you
would
change a
just be-
light bulb, if you change a light bulb, you've maintained it. So
maintained
Yeah,
that
and so
means it
it's kind
applies
of
to every,
any light that's
existence.
that's either currently in existence or maybe in existence in the future.
Outdoor lighting, yeah.
Yeah, outdoor lighting, so that could apply to someone's front door light versus, so there's a difference between, I think, the commercial and, existing residential versus anything that is in existence or might be in existence in the future. It's the is part that I think something that's currently existing on someone's house, I don't know that we're looking necessarily to say, you need to take down this light or have a 100-watt light instead of a,
You may be saying you need to have a 100-watt light instead of a 300-watt floodlight. And I don't know if we can do it, that's where we'd have to get Eric Larson's opinion, is whether we can make it, quote, retroactive.
Yeah, and I think from an organizational standpoint, I think we are all in agreement, the commercial side, including, what I'll say, commercial and residential, because church is a permitted use in every residential district. So every residential district could have a church tomorrow. So I think, having a section on the commercial piece is a no-brainer and would apply to all zoning districts for commercial uses. The residential, I think then you got, in addition to the philosophical, is it prospective or retroactive or both? Or is it prospective for everything but retroactive for certain things? And that we would need some town legal advice on. But then philosophically, do we want to, I want yellow lights. Can we just say that out loud?
Hmm. And isn't
But
a
I-
church institutional, not residential?
It may have been an well, it is.
It's a
in-
conditional use, so we would consider it institutional as a land use.
Yeah.
And so we
Right.
would, I
But
mean,
it's
I
a
think that
permitted-
schools, churches, things of the like, the town hall here, we would have to look at what we have here, which I didn't do, but I could see what we have, and only because I didn't find the plans, so
skate
they're
park.
somewhere, aren't they?
But I think a church can be built in any residential district as a conditional use. It's a permitted
Oh,
conditional
okay, I
use
see
in
what
any,
you're saying.
so
Okay.
if you were in a residential district, you
You could
could
have
put
a
a,
church.
you could put a new church up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So just, I highlighted yellow for a reason because, I mean, applicability could be, we have to decide what we want as to be applicable, what percentages we would want, if we, the yellow could easily change. I mean, anything could change on here, but these were the highlights that I said, we need to get input, I need to get input to really know what we want to apply this to. I can tell you this, as far as some of the other codes that we have, we typically, Dave and I typically are dealing with either our own observations, if we see something, or complaints.
Well,
That's usually how it goes. We're not out,
there
we're
is no
not
such thing
driving
as a-
roads looking for violations. We get enough in without the,
Would every new house need to submit a lighting plan to you or to the planning commission or someone?
Every new house would, that's the intent.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah, but what's wrong with that? That's good.
You want every new house coming here, the planning commission?
I think it's part of, we're going for landscape. As soon as this is done, we're going to revise our landscaping ordinance. We want a landscaping
And-
plan for every structure too,
Every structure or every development?
or development.
development.
Right, and I could see a landscaping plan for development, I could even see a lighting plan for a development, like where are you gonna require the homeowners to put up lampposts, or are you gonna require it? Because it's in my HOA deed that I have to put up a lamppost. And it tells me how high it is, but it doesn't say what kind of fixture I can put in it, what bulb I can put in it,
How bright it can be.
yeah. And I guess we could regulate that, but then when I built my house, I have outdoor lighting, and I've got zones, and I actually turn them down at 9 at night, but I don't turn them off. But I dim them. But are we gonna do that for every, and then how do you enforce it?
What you could do, though, is if it's in the code in place, that would be something that could be checked by the building inspector. The homeowner submits the plans, submits their lighting for their home, what they're proposing. It's not gonna be that much, you would think. They're gonna have some landscape-type lighting. They're gonna have, like, the front door, maybe the post off front. What we're gonna catch is someone putting up a floodlight in the backyard. so they can play basketball all night or something. And
And I know we're thinking about this strictly in the terms of residential, but what about for those agricultural residential folks? So there are still a couple of farms that are there, and as much as I can agree with you on the yellow lights, some of those outbuildings specifically have those brighter lights
Yep.
for an intended purpose of security. And I don't see a carve-out here on any of that.
there's a limitation on the number of lumens per acre, but a floodlight isn't gonna meet that requirement. So a floodlight would probably, on a farm, probably would work.
Well, this doesn't apply to A1, but it does apply to A2.
Correct. And I think there's still a couple of A2 properties on Highway 18 as well.
Oh,
We got a
zone
bunch
3 is,
there, yeah.
zone 3 is A1 and AE, yeah, okay.
So I think that those need to be somehow specifically addressed so that for those, and I can think of that corner of 18 and Elmhurst, which it's lit up for a reason because there's been several incidents over there on that,
okay.
on those properties. So I think consideration is we turn, whether it be to legal or other districts for advice, should be considered. But I'd also ask, what's the concern over the festoon lighting?
It was just listed in there, so when talking to Mequon, they said that they didn't like that lighting when they wrote this. But now with outdoor seating and kind of the trend to have that type of lighting, you know what it is, it's all the lights. So then they limit that to, I think each light bulb is 75 lumens, which equates to whatever, something. Yeah, that's about, I mean, that's lower than 25 watts for each light. So they do allow it. They've more or less waived it because so many people with COVID starting having outdoor seating, and
But we're prohibiting it?
it's yellowed. It's a question mark. I don't, I kind of like those lights. Some people don't like them because they just don't like that much light. But I've seen those on all sides of houses, not as much in the front, but I've seen it on sides and rear. Do you want once again, we have large lots. We don't have lots that are so close together, but if you had lots that were close together, would you want
could
festoon
attrib-
lighting up all
yeah.
night or till 1 in the morning?
But if someone does put it up like on their deck patio, someone could potentially see that, right, in the interest of looking at how do we police this? And someone could say, that's obstructing my view, it's glaring,
Yeah.
and call into the town and say, this neighbor needs to take it down. And then where does that slippery slope of decorating your house from putting up festoon lightings go into Christmas lights or other holiday lights?
We exclude the holiday lighting in here. So we wouldn't count that.
Okay.
Of course, that starts at Halloween, I suppose, and goes through Christmas nowadays.
There's one house I drive past in Brookfield to take my kids to school that has lights year-round for different holidays. I'm not,
Yeah, well,
so I'm just
Yep.
saying it can actually.
You must go by my
Oh,
neighbor.
she's year-round.
Labor Day,
She is year-round.
Halloween.
I have a
Thanksgiving.
neighbor that has lights, lights on all the time, pretty much. It doesn't bother me because our bedroom's in the back, so I don't see it at night, but.
Part of the issue of floodlights, is that kind of what I've heard
Pardon?
several times, floodlights? That's what I've heard several times. as
Well,
far
or is
as-
the issue, people don't want to get curtains and blinds, just like a fence makes good neighbors, good curtains and blinds make good neighbors too,
We don't have blinds on any of our windows, but.
but you don't
built-
really need them, you're
it's-
back in,
That's why I would say that sometimes I don't know if we're gonna get a lot of neighbor complaints if we just have to deal with the glare and, which is the intense light maybe we deal with that on a case-by-case basis. Instead of having this big, everybody has to comply with this big residential, requirement. It's gonna be hard to police, because
We'll just police incident by incident, complaint by complaint.
Yeah.
But we still need some form of structures or code in which to enforce. because now we don't have anything.
I agree, but it's gonna come down to, you know, someone could have a light that's shining on a tree that meets the code, but it might be glaring to someone else that lives close by. That's what I mean, that's the problem I think that I'm gonna have with this, is that they could be compliant with the code, yet still have glare. Someone's gonna say, well, it's glare to me. So what do we do with that, you know? It's hard to write a code that says, you know, unless we have all cut-off lighting and you have, you know, anything that any light, you can't see the actual, you know, the actual, light
Fixture. yeah.
fixture,
And that doesn't work
you know.
for most lights.
yeah.
Ron, with the floodlight, like if there, for example, and I don't know if this has happened, but if there's a floodlight that's pointed at someone's house, is there a point at which it's a nuisance, just criminal nuisance? Or, I mean, it seems like if they're literally a foot from someone's window, put a floodlight, that it could raise that there might be enforcement other than through a lightning ordinance. Or I don't know if this has been an issue
I don't
or not.
know, I don't know of any incident where the nuisance ordinance was enforced against any lighting situation at all. Tim, do you?
Not that I
I
recall.
think it's
no.
difficult to enforce the nuisance ordinance.
Nuisances are very hard to enforce, because it's usually someone's opinion versus someone else's
Well, that's
opinion.
like what I'm
so-
kind of wondering about this though,
Yeah.
too, if we can't enforce it, you know,
That's good.
um,
Good, is it?
Well, this has to be specific enough that it can be enforced. And if the definition of glare is ambiguous, then we should either take glare out of the ordinance if we don't think we can enforce it, or change the definition into something that can be enforced. Now, I have had personal complaints where people come up to me and one house is on the lake and they have a boathouse, and the boathouse has a floodlight and it shines right into a neighbor's house, and he's asked the neighbor to turn it off at night. The neighbor won't do it, so he actually walks over and unscrews it. And then the neighbor came to me and said, he's unscrewing my light. And I'm saying, well, that's trespass, so call the sheriff. And probably you can have him cited for trespass if he's caught unscrewing your light. So she put up a camera to videotape, to security camera, to get him on tape. I mean, it gets ridiculous, but
You want us doing that now?
no, no. There should be some mechanism by which we can say, you can have a light there, but it can't be a floodlight shining into your neighbor's house.
Well,
My direct neighbor has those, you were talking about those lights that go from tree to tree. for
Yep.
example. My neighbor has that, and they're on all year long, every night. They don't bother me, but they could, I mean, it's definitely light pollution. It's definitely light trespass.
well, with floodlights, I don't know enough about wattage, I mean, but is part of it with floodlight just A, the type of light, and B, the wattage?
Well, and it's directional, I mean,
Yeah.
It's all of it.
but, do we have a sense for any given house, what the foot candles at the lot line are?
No.
Because
No
to Ron's point, I think we need an objective standard for glare. And I honestly think that's about all we would probably want to enforce in a residential environment, is
Yeah,
something
it's,
like that.
you can light up your own properties, but don't let it cross the property line and don't let it shoot up into the sky, you know what I
Right.
mean?
But you
We have to get a handle on light trespass. However we do it, we have to get a handle on what I call light pollution.
But it's, you know, you talk to law enforcement, they tell you that you gotta light stuff up, especially in this day and age, so it's that fine line in that gray area, like I said, you know, or in my opening comments, to, you know, maintain the characteristics of the town, but also, you know, for safety and, you know, the bad things that happen, you know,
Yeah,
people are.
Spotlights that are
yeah.
censored motion-based are gonna pop on when the deer runs by at 3 in the morning.
Yep.
Do we need to also include, like, I mean, if, the easiest response in some of these, if a neighbor gets, from a residential perspective, someone comes in and says there's a glare, someone could easily come back and say, I'm doing it for security, right? So to Ed's point about that, do we need to have, I agree with the idea of strengthening up what is our definition of glare, but in the same right, do we also need to consider what the definition of a security light might be?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point.
Because I think there are specific homes within the town of Delafield that do meet a specific criteria for needing that type of light.
Yeah, and I would say the agricultural area, you know, the big traditional street light, when you got 10 acres of small buildings that you want to protect. But that's different than a
People love to
residential.
hide out in.
Yeah,
Huh?
they do.
I mean, there's a lot of areas with flagpoles. To fly a flag at night, you're supposed to light it. And neighbors, when I lived in Texas, they put up flagpoles and they lit them. And that was, it wasn't at my house, but it was in the neighborhood. What they're putting up now around the lake, I've heard complaints about, are these little red lights that are to keep the deer off the property.
Yep.
They're just little red lights all over the property. Several people put them up all along Lakeside Road.
Do they shine somewhere?
I don't think they do a
They
thing.
blink. I think you're talking about predator lights.
Yep.
So they're
Oh.
just a flashing red
Yeah, they're flashing red lights.
light that's supposed to look like predator eyes. So you space them out at different levels in order
And
to.
it blinks all night?
Yeah.
Yep. They're
See, I
usually
think
light
that would
censored.
be not, that wouldn't be allowed. We don't allow blinking lights in the code.
There you run into where
There-
there's probably an exclusion needed for agricultural areas.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've also opened up that door, right, to allow residents to have chickens. And those predator lights are popular with people that do have poultry. Because you set them up either for weasels, foxes, coyotes at different light, or at different
Frequencies.
frequencies and
right?
heights.
Yep.
I mean, whatever. It's interesting. So this is a start. This is not gonna get done quickly. but
Right.
We need to work on it.
A suggestion I had thought about is to, if you wanted to, is to have a subcommittee of people, a smaller group, kind of go through this in in detail and make some suggestions after hearing this. But it's,
Last time I did that, it didn't work out.
This would be an official subcommittee of the planning commission.
I mean, it would
If
be.
that's what you recommend, I'm not opposed to it.
The purpose would be, I mean, we could sit here, and we've done, I don't know if you're around when we redid the zoning code in like 98, 99, and we had plan commission meetings extra plan meetings for a year, and they were like 3 hours each, and you
Well, we took 9
you
months
go
to
through
to write a
paragraph
chicken
by
ordinance. so-
paragraph, word by word, and,
No, we did the same thing with the conditional use
Yeah, we
rewrite.
took a whole year to do the
Yeah.
conditional use permit. This is the most, we've been rewriting ordinances for the last year and a half. And this is the one that's gonna take, this and landscaping is gonna
yeah.
take.
Well, and this is a blank sheet of paper in one sense, and it raises a lot of issues. I certainly would support a working group to work with you, offline of that.
Just to refine it to a point where we think, I mean,
Okay.
it's,
Who wants to volunteer to be on it? Nicole, would you like to volunteer? to
What,
be
because
on
I knew what predator lights were?
it? You do more than I
You
do.
also bring the whole agricultural aspect to it.
yeah.
Terry has a question.
Well,
I-
unless you're keeping it just to commission members, I'm happy to assist with that. Because I think a lot of it is education, just kind of letting our community know, we're talking about this, hey, do your part. I mean, I think I've got a lot of opinions on it, so I'm certainly willing to assist in your subcommittee or share my opinions.
I don't want anybody to recommend the county get involved.
Well, you might have the expertise.
I don't mind being in there from an agricultural perspective.
Okay, we have one volunteer.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
No,
You're already in, sorry.
I will float
Gracious,
in and out.
gracious of you to.
My thought is, and I appreciate your suggestion. My thought is, I'd like to get this refined a little bit more than where we're at.
Yeah.
You know, then-
We got a public
and then-
hearing
then-
requirement, at least one,
Yeah.
maybe more.
Not necessarily. I mean, we could do this a lot in a couple of different ways. This could be an ordinance, separate from zoning, so it doesn't go to the county. It would be a separate section in our code. It could be a standard that we adopted as a general standard. For example, we'd have our, lighting standards and our landscape standards, and then they're referred to in the code as just saying you have to meet those standards. And then those could be changed, over time without going through a code ordinance process. So, I mean, there's
Do we
other
have
communities,
standards like
other
that?
communities have like engineering standards, architectural standards that are outside the code, but are referred to in the code, but they're outside of the code. Just a suggestion,
Do we have anything like that now?
we don't.
Yeah, I'm
We-
not
we
aware.
Well,
don't
and I
as a
also don't
community.
know that standards could be enforced.
But it might be similar to like the statutes that refer to the code. Like, there's DWD code, there's
Yeah.
DCF code, in Wisconsin law, and then the statute just incorporates the code, and then they rewrite the code without having to go through
The statute. Yeah.
the statute.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
Like, so Dave, the building inspector, would still be able to enforce the standard through the code?
yeah, through the
ordinance.
code. I mean, the code would require that they meet the standard, but it's not written in the code. I mean, that would be another question for Eric when we meet with him next week
Well, and
or something.
again, in the commercial, at the development stage for residential development and in a commercial development, I could see being able to enforce the standard by incorporating it into the code. A glaring light that your neighbor put up yesterday, I'm not sure that a standard would have the force of law, but we should ask Eric.
Okay.
Because if it lacks the enforcement ability, then I would think we would want to put it into the code of zoning code.
Yeah. So, how about if we had a committee of Tim, Dave, Kevin, me, and Nicole?
So it's you two and Nicole
Yeah. Yeah,
and staff.
and staff. You volunteered.
Apparently, just like Nicole volunteered.
When I was in the Navy, that's how they did it.
You didn't even say anything about the festoon lights.
I like the
By the
student
way, I
light.
agree with you on the festoon lights. I mean, it just seems like that one's,
I like festoon lights. I
Yeah.
think they
They're
really make.
festive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But some people could find them obnoxious.
some people have,
Yes.
believe me.
Well, I think when you have residents complain about lighting, I think you're gonna realize that when Tim or Dave goes to that property, they're gonna realize that they probably are within the code.
Well, and that's where we need, again, real-life examples. On the commercial side, it's probably easier to say OAW and the church would meet this.
Well, they would meet it before they would come in, so
Right.
it's like.
Right,
we
but
can- we
again,
can
I
have that.
kind of need to know what does 0-foot candles or a half-a-foot candle at a property line mean in a residential subdivision?
Well, zero means,
Zero.
Zero means at that point, there should be no light. But what is that? I mean, so you think,
Well,
if
but
you
you
think
can
of,
see all the lights.
think
so
of light, but, right, that's right. That's that glare thing. So if you have a big light let's just say you got a large parcel and you got a big light and it shines down, you can go out, well, a lot of the parking lots, that we do, it's zero I'll just take the church for example, because if you go out to the lot lines, you're gonna get 0.5 or less foot candles at the lot lines at the church, okay? There they have cutoff lighting, so as you go by on the highway, you can't see the lighting, unless you're right under it and you look up, but,
Right.
I mean, the idea is you don't see the light bulb, shall we
Right.
say, okay? So those, but if you have something that you're talking about, and you can see, if you got the big light, let's just say, I call it a barn light, where you got,
The lamp.
you can see it from all sides. It could be zero at the lot line, but if someone
You can see it a mile away.
living away sees that light, or across the lake, I get that every so often
all
too,
the
is
time.
that light across the lake shines across, hits the water and goes right into my living room. And my living room lights up, I don't even need a light in there. I've heard that one a couple times.
Oh, yeah.
So you could stand at the lot line and we could make a measurement and say, oh, it meets the requirement, but it's still that glare or that light that you see. That's
But
It's
is
not-
that- I
it's
guess
not an easy-
how is it something then that's, what's,
How do you make it objective?
Yeah,
How do you
how
put
do
a
you have a standard?
measurement?
How do you make it,
How do you make the concept of glare something that isn't subjective?
I've yet to figure that out. I could be a rich man if I did, probably. But I don't think anyone has done that. I think every community struggles with light trespass and glare. And how to measure
What?
that.
Like,
Light trespass and glare. How do you measure light trespass, other than saying at the lot line, it's gotta be 0 or something like that? Then you could say, that's subjective. But they might say, well, I still see the light. Well, that's glare. How we define glare, possibly.
We'll have to work on it.
or is it something just that related to, you know, if it's this type of light, like a floodlight or this or that, that it has to be off at a certain point, then I know there's the security
Safety
issues.
issues.
I mean, that's, or even ones that are motion censored. I mean, I know a lot of people have the ones where someone walks past, they flash,
Yeah.
you know, and,
Yeah, we're not gonna turn those off.
no.
So, not to make anything even more difficult for us, but if you are gonna do some reading on lighting, you might run into what's known as bug ratings, BUG, which actually stands for backlight, uplight, and glare. And there's kind of a new system that's coming out, and I don't know of any communities that have kind of embraced it, but it's part of the dark sky, you know, information, as well as just a new way to determine, you know, if they meet some of this stuff. So if you're doing some reading, you might read about bug ratings. I just throw that out there only because you might see it. I'm not advocating that. I don't know enough about it to really know. And I have not been through the model ordinance from the Dark Sky Association. And so I can look at that as well and see what they have. Once again, it's 44 pages. It's very detailed. I think it's probably set up for a much larger community, a lot of urban areas and things like that. So
Might have some relevant sections, so I'll look at it.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. There's a lot of philosophy and a lot of background about why we're doing why they're doing what they're doing and what you should not do and things like that. But a lot of things won't apply to the town because we're relatively, we don't have street lights, you know. One of the things that they recommend right away is, you know, different street lights, different lights, cut off fixtures. I mean, it goes on and on.
But we were changing the lights we have, the street lights we have along Maple. Didn't we just, Dan, you and I?
We're gonna upgrade those to LEDs.
Lights that we have to
Yeah.
the LED lights,
Yeah.
low energy lights,
On Maple?
wherever there are in the town that haven't already transitioned. So
Oh, through-
anytime a
from
light,
Re-Energies.
Yeah.
From Re-Energies.
so currently when a
That's-
light goes out,
that's
they
a white
replace
light,
them with
though.
the new,
That's a white light.
it's a white light.
Or purple if you're on the highway, if you've seen that.
Those were defective bulbs. Much prettier. Okay.
So
If anyone has other thoughts about it throughout the week, just shoot Dan or I an email and we'll, you know, we gotta talk about this and figure out, there's a lot we can do, really. There's a lot out there. I don't wanna make this so cumbersome, but that we can't enforce it or that it's hard to understand for
And
our
I found this,
citizens.
quite honestly, a little bit complicated because we had both zones and categories or something, both.
Classes and zones, yeah.
Yeah,
But a lot of codes have that. I'm sorry, a lot of the new codes go with that. Once again, I said, some of these communities have one page and they say very little about, other than no, you know, 0.5 foot candles at the lot line, they don't say a whole lot. Other than you can't have glare. You don't want, reduce glare. I mean, it doesn't, there's not a lot of meat to that. Other than it states it.
Well, I guess, and even the definition of glare, says, one of them, it says also a light ray emanating directly from a source such that it falls directly upon the eye of the observer. It seems like that's any light, right? I mean, unless I'm missing
Well,
something. Yeah.
The difference is, here's the difference though, just if, go by the church and look at the parking lot lights. You don't see the light. You see the shine, the light coming down off the square box. Same with OAW, same with Equitable. You know, you don't see the actual fixture, the light fixture. But if you go past some of the agricultural barns and look, and you'll see the floodlight, I call it a floodlight, it's just, it's,
An old street lamp, the
it's like a
old-fashioned
street lamp light. You can
Like-
actually see where the light is emanating from because it's glass around it on all sides.
But for
So-
residential, most of them are going to be that type of light. I mean, some of them will
Yeah.
be cans where you don't see the fixture, but a lot of them are gonna be the little candelabra type light bulbs, which is what,
Yeah. So
All
the,
light fixtures
so
on
the
mine
lights
say.
the lights that wash the walls on some of the commercial buildings, I'm still OAW in the church, you know, you don't see the light, you just see the wash of the light. That makes kind of an architectural feature of that.
No, I think this one, but this definition says a light ray, which,
Well, that means you see the light. The light ray goes from the light directly to someone's eye.
so that means you're actually seeing the bulb. I think so the concern's more the bulb.
I think that's what,
I mean, that
well,
seems more of
yeah.
a,
yeah, and I think that's what it means, but in a residential context, I don't know that that helps us, because
You always
every
see the bulb.
residential light has a light bulb.
and you
that you
always,
see.
and
But
you
it could
almost always
be-
see it unless it's
I
frosted.
mean, if everybody would put in cutoff lighting and just have it shine down, that would be much better, but
Well,
We
again,
don't.
the
We
lampposts- The
It-
lamppost
so you-
that every subdivision uses to light up their street is,
right, and so it has glass on all sides so
Yep.
that you can light up more. That's the challenge of, you know, and when you're looking at, go look at his lamppost, you'll probably get, you might consider it glare. Because I can
There's a car
see,
driving past slowly, it's me.
Just drive past any subdivision that's been created in the town in the last 20 years. They
Yeah.
all have require that lamp
Right.
post.
yeah,
But, I mean, by definition, then you're not infringing on your neighbor's rights, right? There's no pollution because you agreed to live in that neighborhood that has those requirements per the homeowners association.
doesn't always stop people from, you know, there's
well,
individuals that are
it is
gonna
until
say
I
there's
put in a
glare.
200 watt or a 300 watt bulb in mine, and everybody else has got 60s.
Some people are more bothered by the glare than others, let's just put it that way.
Well, and I guess in some respects, though, it does require like a reasonable person standard, you know, because there are people who are going to be bothered by
Right.
something.
Anything.
99% of the, yes,
Anything, anything. They're not reasonable and prudent, so.
correct.
I can remember this way back, I don't know if you were around, Edward, but there was a gentleman on the lake, on the north side of the lake, that could see the red light on the
Waterfront.
Williams Farm tower.
Yep.
It's not there anymore, but it was the red light on the Williams Tower. And that actually changed from red, and then they changed it out to a strobe light, which then bounced off the lake, and he could not sleep.
I remember that.
you
Because of
know.
the airport too, so.
Well, they had to have the light
Right.
on, they had to have a light on, they didn't have to have the strobe, but the airport wanted strobe lights, but they ended up changing it back to a red light for this guy. The red light didn't bother him, it's the strobe light that flashed, bounced into his house, and couldn't sleep. So, I'm glad you remembered it.
I remember that.
I don't know why I remember these things, but
You should write a book.
no one else complained on the lake, but he did, so. I hope he's not here, so. I'm sure we'd get
All right.
along just fine.
Take it under advisement. Discussion, none. Next meeting, December 7th.
Yeah, I don't know if anything's coming up, but we can see if we want this on, or,
I don't
I
know
don't
that
think
it'll be
we're
ready.
ready. We'll have to have a couple of meetings with the
yeah,
local.
yeah. And what's January meeting? Anybody know?
The January meetings? Oh, well, yeah, it's just the first Tuesday. It's early.
4th?
The 4th, okay. I just don't know of anything coming back into the plan commission coming up. No one's talked to me about anything yet.
If anything comes up, we can meet, so.
Yep.
Item 8,
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And good night.